$55 million. That is the price of a single wristwatch, and here is the part that breaks people's brains. It barely tells the time. The clock face is so small you almost can't find it. It doesn't even have a fancy mechanical movement inside, just a humble battery-powered quartz tick, the same kind of movement that runs a $20 watch from the drugstore. And yet, this thing is worth more than a private jet. Today I want to take you all the way up the most expensive watches on Earth, one rung at a time, until we reach the single most valuable timepiece ever made. And trust me, the higher we climb, the more insane it gets. Let me set the ground rules first, because the words most expensive watch actually hide two completely different crowns, and people argue about them constantly. There is the most expensive watch ever sold at a public auction, where the whole world watches the hammer fall. And then there is the most expensive watch ever made, a price tag set by the maker, never sent to auction at all. We are going to crown both today. So let's start climbing. One quick thing, so we're all speaking the same language. In the watch world, a complication is just any function a watch does, beyond telling the basic time. A stopwatch, a moon phase display, a chiming bell, a perpetual calendar that knows the length of every month. The more complications you cram into one tiny case, the harder it is to build, and the more legendary the watch becomes. Keep that word in your back pocket because it is about to do a lot of heavy lifting. I'll begin with a name almost everyone recognizes, Paul Newman. The Hollywood legend wore a Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, reference 6239, given to him by his wife Joanne Woodward, with the words "Drive carefully me" engraved on the back. That exact watch, his personal watch, went under the hammer at Phillips in New York in October of 2017. The final price was $17.75 million for a Rolex. For years, that made it the most expensive wristwatch ever sold at auction, and it turned a single Daytona dial style into the most coveted look in all of watch collecting. Here's the kicker. For years, Newman wore that Daytona almost every single day. Then he reportedly handed it off to a young man named James Cox, who was dating his daughter at the time, and it quietly disappeared from public view for decades before resurfacing to shatter every record in the room. A watch he gave away became the most valuable wristwatch on Earth. But it was only the beginning. Now let's go back in time to the most legendary pocket watch on the planet. In 1925, a wealthy New York banker named Henry Graves Jr. was locked in a quiet, gentlemanly arms race with a car magnate named James Ward Packard. The two of them were competing to own the single most complicated watch in the world. So Graves commissioned Patek Philippe to build him the ultimate weapon. It took 7 years. When it was finished in 1933, the Henry Graves Supercomplication carried 24 separate complications, including a map of the night sky over Graves's apartment in Manhattan. Graves paid $15,000 for it back in 1933. Fast forward to November 2014, and that same watch sold at Sotheby's in Geneva for $24 million, setting a world record and earning the nickname the Mona Lisa of horology. But records are made to be broken, and this next one shattered everything. In November of 2019, the watch world gathered in Geneva for a charity auction called Only Watch, which raises money for research into Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Up for sale was a one-of-a-kind Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime, reference 6300A. Here is what made it special. Patek had never, ever made a Grandmaster Chime in stainless steel before, and they swore they never would again. This was the only one. It packs 20 complications into the case, including 5 different chiming functions, and the whole case actually flips over, giving you 2 completely different dials. One face for the time, one face for the strike work. It took Patek's master watchmakers years of development, and only 7 examples were ever produced across all metals, with this steel one standing utterly alone. Bidding opened at 5 million Swiss francs. 12 minutes later, after a furious bidding war, the hammer came down at $31 million. To this day, that Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime is the most expensive watch ever sold at a public auction. So there it is, the first crown. But we are not done. Because the most expensive watches in the world were never sold at auction at all. To understand the next tier, I have to take you all the way back to the 18th century and a watch wrapped in legend. Around 1783, the master watchmaker Abraham Louis Breguet received an extraordinary order. The customer asked for a watch containing every single complication known to watchmaking, with no limit on the time it would take or the money it would cost. The watch was said to be connected to Queen Marie Antoinette of France, which is why it is forever known as the Marie Antoinette, or watch number 160. The Queen was executed in 1793. Breguet himself died in 1823. The watch was not finished until 1827, 44 years after it was ordered. Neither of them ever saw it complete. That watch was once stolen in a famous museum heist, vanished for decades, and resurfaced. In 2013, it was valued at around $30 million. For well over a century, it held the title of the most complicated watch in the world. Before we reach the very top, there is one more name you need to know, and it comes with a famous owner attached. At Baselworld in 2015, the celebrity jeweler Jacob & Company unveiled a watch they simply called the Billionaire. The price tag was $18 million. The entire case is smothered in 260 carats of emerald-cut diamonds, with some individual stones weighing as much as 3 carats each, all mounted on tiny pyramids of 18-carat white gold so the light hits them from every angle. And unlike the diamond watches we are about to see, this one hides a real mechanical heart, a tourbillon ticking away beneath all that ice. Its most famous buyer is the boxer Floyd Mayweather, who reportedly walked out with one and wore $18 million on his wrist like it was a Friday night accessory. It is jaw-dropping. And yet, believe it or not, it is not even close to the top. And now we arrive at the modern throne, and it belongs almost entirely to one man. Laurence Graff, the British jeweler whose company, Graff Diamonds, deals in some of the rarest coloured stones ever pulled out of the earth. Graff doesn't really make watches to tell time. He makes watches to show off diamonds, and that changes the math completely. The runner-up to the throne is a Graff piece called the Fascination. It carries a price tag of around $40 million, and it has a clever secret. At its heart sits a detachable, roughly 38-carat pear-shaped white diamond, which you can pop out of the watch and wear as a ring. So it's a $40 million watch and an engagement ring at the same time. But even $40 million is not the top of the mountain, which brings us, finally, to the most expensive watch ever made. Ladies and gentlemen, the Graff Diamonds Hallucination. Graff unveiled it at Baselworld in 2014, and he reportedly called it a true work of art, the realization of a vision he had carried for many years. The price, $55 million. Let me tell you what $55 million actually buys. The watch is built on a platinum bracelet, and set into that platinum are over 110 carats of some of the rarest colored diamonds on the planet. We're talking fancy vivid yellows, intense pinks, deep blues, greens and oranges, cut into hearts, pears, marquises, emeralds and rounds, a riot of color that looks less like a watch and more like a galaxy strapped to your wrist. And somewhere in that sea of diamonds sits a tiny dial framed by pink diamonds, quietly keeping time with a simple quartz movement. Designers, gemologists, and master craftsmen reportedly poured thousands of hours into setting every single stone by hand, matching colors and cuts until the whole bracelet shimmered like a stained glass window. It is, by almost any measure, the most concentrated pile of rare colored diamonds ever assembled into one wearable object. That last detail is the one that drives watch purists absolutely crazy, and I love it. The single most expensive watch in the entire world doesn't run on some grand mechanical masterpiece with hundreds of hand-finished parts. It runs on a battery, because the hallucination was never about the machine. It is a diamond showcase that happens to tell the time, and at $55 million, it is the most valuable timepiece ever created. So let's put this whole climb in perspective, because the numbers get genuinely absurd. Paul Newman's Daytona, the most expensive Rolex ever, was $17.75 million. The Grandmaster Chime, the auction king, was $31 million. And the Hallucination, the made king, is $55 million. That one watch is worth more than roughly 3 Paul Newman Daytonas stacked together. It is worth more than 3 of Floyd Mayweather's $18 million billionaire watches. It's worth more than most super yachts. You could buy a fleet of Rolls-Royce Phantoms, a mansion in Beverly Hills, and a private jet, and still not touch the price of this single object you wear on your wrist. To put it another way, at $55 million, the hallucination costs more per second of time it shows you than almost any object a human being has ever strapped to their body. And maybe that is the strangest truth about the very top of the watch world. Once you climb past a certain altitude, you are no longer paying for engineering, or accuracy, or even time itself. You are paying for rarity, for legend, for the story, and for the simple, staggering fact that no one else on Earth can have one. A $50 watch and a $55 million watch will tell you it's noon at exactly the same moment. The difference is everything you can't see on the dial. So here's my question for you. Of every watch we climbed past today, the Paul Newman Daytona, the Henry Graves, the Grandmaster Chime, the Marie Antoinette, the Hallucination, which one would you actually want on your wrist? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the climb, stick around because there is always something even more expensive waiting at the top.